What's up, everybody? Cole Sands Fishing here. It is February 28th, 2022, and we're going to dive into this week's report. So before we get started, this week's episode is brought to you by two of my sponsors. The first is Lake Chickamauga Rentals. And what it is, it's a couple cabins located on Lake Chickamauga in Richland Creek, right there in Dayton. Awesome setup. You're right there on the lake. There's your own boat ramp for when the water comes up. You can put in right there. Very affordable, so y'all be sure to check them out at LakeChickamaugARentals.com. And my other sponsor that's bringing this episode to you this week is Bass Attitude Fishing. And it's an apparel company that makes some cool hats, some cool shirts, and y'all be sure to check them out because they really do make some awesome stuff. But so yeah, let's go ahead and dive into this week's report. So as a lot of y'all know, we have had a ton of rain. It has rained nonstop, it seems like. I'm pretty sure I saw Noah starting to build an ark again. But so we've had a ton of rain. The water's come up past summer pool. So, I mean, in the past couple days, it's come up like 6 foot. And what that's made for is a lot of tough fishing that, you know, the fish are just, they're all over the place right now. You had that water that was at winter pool, and then it came up all of a sudden. You know, it's chocolate milk in a lot of places. And it had to really keep us on our toes this week because it seemed like the fish just, you know, were moving all over the place. Had 3 guide trips last week. First day was actually a really tough trip. We bounced around a lot of stuff that should have been good, and for whatever reason, man, they just weren't firing that day very good for us. Second day, we decided to run upriver, fished a lot of current breaks, just stuff right out of the main river, some main river stuff. It actually had a pretty good day. My client had a 5-pound smallmouth, and we had a pretty solid limit of fish. And then the last day, we ran around mid-lake to the low end. And we caught a lot of fish, no giants, but we had a pretty successful day, caught close to 15 fish, and, you know, made something happen on a tough day. And, you know, this past week, the water was rising every day. It seemed like it was really warm leading up to it, and then it kind of cooled off, so it wasn't the best fishing conditions. But looking forward to this upcoming week, we got that water's going to start to slowly fall. And it's not falling fast, so that's a good thing. The fish shouldn't freak out too much, and it's supposed to get really warm by the end of the week. So I think what's going to happen, you'll see a lot of these big females really start to move up and start to bite. I think by the end of the week, you'll see a lot of big fish get caught. You know, it might happen. You know, it might happen tomorrow, or it might happen closer to the weekend. But I think you'll see a lot of big fish start to get caught. But what seemed to happen is when the water came way up really quick, a lot of them females stayed a little bit deeper because the water temp was cold, and that's what made it so tough. Because, you know, when that water gets muddy, it seems like the fish you catch are super shallow, or they're relating to cover. And it seems like a lot of the females, you know, kind of stayed off a little bit. But with that being said, I think that'll change this week. The fish are going to get used to that water being high. They're going to push up there, and it should be a really good week of fishing. But so starters, let's talk about what worked last week, the baits that were successful, and then we'll transition, and I'll tell you a couple more baits that I think will work this week. And it should be a really good week of fishing, like I mentioned. But so yeah, we'll talk about the day I ran upriver and fished more current related stuff. The deal was definitely that day really a couple different baits. First was the Alabama rig, that old Diamond Baits Alabama rig. Y'all heard me talk about it a lot. Did a little modification on it, put some bright blades on it, just because the water is really muddy right now. That's what the 5-pound smallmouth came off of. It bit the Citron color, True Bass swim bait. 1/8 ounce heads, just really throwing that anywhere there's a little current eddy. You know, if you see current coming around a rock and it looks like there's a little bit of slack water, then fish are going to hang out wherever that slack water's at. And we had a really good day throwing the Diamond Baits Alabama rig around, caught several fish, probably close to 10 fish on that. And then, you know, kind of made a transition. We slowed down in some places, and actually caught several fish that day on a little Ned rig. I think this is an 1/8 ounce head. Just throwing a little, you know, little green pumpkin, soft plastic on the back, just biting it down. Throwing that on 10-pound Yozuri braid to a 10-pound Yozuri T7 fluorocarbon leader. And just fishing it around a lot of rock, a lot of just, you know, it's the same places you'd throw an Alabama rig, just you know, a lot of rock, a little places that the fish can sit out of the current, just right there on the edge of it. And caught some nice fish on it as well. Also, Caught a few this past week. Caught a few on Chickamauga, and I went to a little mountain lake next to us and caught a bunch on this with the flooded water. Just that little hardcore 60F medium runner crankbait. And a lot of people are throwing red right now, and it absolutely catches them. But I like to usually throw one. I'll have one person on the boat throwing red, and then my other muddy water go-to is that chartreuse and blue. Just kind of a small body crankbait, and cranking that on 12-pound Yozuri T7 fluorocarbon, and just covering a lot of water, just fishing a lot of rock, some wood even, and that's been pretty successful this past week as well. And then the other day where we fished mid lake to low lake, we caught them on really probably 3 different baits. One more thing. Also fishing that current related stuff that we were flipping a little jig. That's a little 1/2 ounce tungsten jig. Kind of fishing it around the rocks, around them current breaks as well. Caught a few on it, and I look forward to it this week. I think that flipping bite's going to really pick up as them fish get used to that water being up, because there is water right now in the bushes and in the reeds and all that stuff. But our other day, where we fishing more mid lake to the low end, the deal there seemed to be, one, we had to find the warmer water temp. There was a lot of water that was like 48, 49 degrees, and we didn't catch a lot of fish out of that. But if we get back in some of them areas that you'd see the water, in the 50s. I think the warmest we saw was about 54, 55. It seemed like there was some bass mixed in. And the biggest key was finding the right water color. Like I said, it's chocolate milk in a lot of places, but there were certain creeks that you'd find a little bit cleaner water. And the deal was definitely finding the edges where the clean water mixed with the muddy water, and just getting in that little mud line mix. And that's where the fish were. To target those fish, throwing that Yozuri Rattling Vibe 5/8. Red was a really good color last week. Caught several on it. And that's the matte crawl color. And then citrus, one I've talked about in several weeks past, was another good one. And then also we threw this little color. This is also a Yozuri Rattling Vibe, this is a killer in muddy water. This is the chartreuse with the purple back, and caught some on it that day too. Just where that water was really muddy, you could throw that around and get bit. It's just a bright crankbait that makes a lot of noise, and that was definitely key to us getting several bites that day as well. And then besides that, my client did pretty well throwing a chatterbait, just a 1/2 ounce chatterbait. We experimented with colors a little bit this past week. Threw that red one some, but really our best chatterbait color this past week on Chickamauga was the white and chartreuse. That really seemed to be the main player. I think it was Thursday when we were out there. As far as that goes, the setup, T7 fluorocarbon, 16-pound. I like a 7:3 to 1 gear ratio, and then I'm throwing that on the 7.2 medium heavy Witch Doctor Tackle Sermon Series rod. And that was really what we caught them on that day, was just mainly that Rattling Vibe, and then that chatterbait. Also caught a few on the hardcore Squarebill this past week. Just that little hardcore. That is the Crank SR65F. Super high quality, comes with super sharp hooks. It's a Japanese bait, so they're very detail oriented when it comes to making these baits, and it runs deep. It runs actually deeper than most Squarebills do. That little guy right there was going about 6 foot this past week, and that's on 16-pound line. And that's just a chartreuse black back, and caught some fish on it. But looking forward to this week. What I think is going to happen, like I said, a lot of them fish are going to get used to that water being up. All these baits I've already mentioned are going to be players. These crankbaits, these lipless, these lipless crankbaits, these rattle traps, these chatterbaits, the Squarebill. All of those are going to be really good players. But also, something I think you might be able to mix in a little bit is the flipping bite. Like I said, the water is in the bushes. When it comes to flipping, when it's real muddy, I just like, something that's just a solid color, black and blue, something like that. Something that really, it's a really solid color in that muddy water. So I think that's going to be something that'll play. You can also flip a jig. I like flipping a jig a lot. Probably a ½ ounce is what I'd go to if I was flipping reeds or even lay downs. If I'm just flipping a Texas rig, I usually go a little bit lighter with like a 1/4 ounce. And I'm going to do that on 20-pound line, 20-pound fluorocarbon. And I think that's going to be a real big player as it warms up. A lot of the females are going to push up into those reeds, into those lay downs. And it seems like the muddier it gets, the closer a fish relate to cover. So, I'm not fishing off the bank as much. I'm really getting in that stuff, making very accurate casts. I mean, that's the biggest thing, whether you're fishing, a rock bank or lay downs or reeds. What separates you from the next angler is how accurate you can cast. So that's one thing that's definitely going to be a player. And then besides that, like I said, all the stuff I've already mentioned. And then just a good old-fashioned spinnerbait. I like, if it's real muddy, I like throwing some bright blades. If it's starting to clear, I usually just go back to, like a silver blade. But white and chartreuse is always a killer. And I want to throw that around a lot of the same places, lay downs, reeds. What's cool about that is you can cover a lot of water, plus you can really throw it up in the cover. But besides that, I mean, that's pretty much what worked last week. It definitely seemed like you had to find a little bit cleaner water. I didn't do all that great in chocolate milk. Not saying you can't catch some fish in that, and they might be giants. But it seemed like I had to find just a little bit cleaner water. And then just picking up that Yo-Zuri Rattling vibe, picking up some of these hardcore crankbaits. The crankbait deal was definitely best on rock. That seemed to be more of a main lake rock deal. I didn't catch a ton in the creeks this past week, but I think that could all change this week as it warms up and as that water starts to clear and it starts to drop. I think you'll see some good fish caught, kind of all across the lake. And that goes from the very south end all the way to the north end. But that's it for this week. Y'all be sure to leave questions in the comments below, and I appreciate y'all watching. Thanks, guys.